So welcome to this episode. Today we are talking about the fire alarm. It has obviously been ringing. Why are we not listening? My name is Tammy Lewis and I am the CEO and the founder of the Community of Guardians. So to begin today, there's a particular kind of danger that arrives not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow accumulating pressure. A system bending, cracking, straining under the weight it was never designed to carry, while everyone with the power to act looks the other way in hopes it's going to hold just a little bit longer. So that is where healthcare stands today, and I believe we are running out of time to pretend otherwise. So the infrastructure is cracking. Long before COVID, our systems were under pressure, and it is now showing irreversible fractures. Emergency rooms stretched beyond capacity, family physicians retiring faster than they can be replaced, mental health wait times measured not in weeks but in years, rural hospitals closing, long-term care facilities chronically underfunded, personal support workers, the quiet backbone of a system that depends on their labor earning wages that do not reflect the weight of what they truly carry. The pandemic did not create these failures, it illuminated them. And when the crisis passed and the applause faded, our healthcare workers returned to those same cracked buildings. The systemic problems remained, the burnout deepened, and the warning bells, which had been ringing for years, kept on ringing. So we've been managing emergencies instead of preventing them, treating symptoms instead of causes, and in doing so, we have left one of the most essential systems in a civilized society dangerously exposed. So a new and more insidious threat. But there is something happening beyond the infrastructure failure that concerns me even more deeply today. So there's been a recent commentary published in a peer-reviewed journal, Nature, titled "What is Unhealthy About Public Health?" Examining developments in the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union has identified something incredibly urgent. Public health is undergoing a crisis that is not only structural, but epistemic. In plain language, it is not just the buildings that are cracking, it is the very foundation of how we produce, share, and trust scientific knowledge. So using the 2026 revision of the U.S. childhood vaccination recommendations as a focal case, the authors show how vaccination has become a privileged terrain for the political weaponization of scientific uncertainty. So let me say this again, because it really matters. The uncertainty that is inherent to science, the honest, necessary, intellectually humble acknowledgement that knowledge is always evolving, is being deliberately exploited as a weapon against public trust. So gaps in trial design, questions about generalizability, limits in surveillance systems, these are normal features of rigorous science. They are how science works, and they're being selectively amplified by political actors to undermine the collective interventions like vaccination that protects all of us. So the deeper problem we must confront here is the journal article makes an argument that I believe every person in this conversation needs to hear. The current crisis in public health cannot be understood only as an external attack on science. It also reflects a longer-standing transformation in how evidence is actually produced, organized, and mobilized. So for decades, evidence-based approaches to medicine and policy have privileged certain forms of knowledge, particularly randomized controlled trials, as the gold standard of legitimacy. This has brought real gains in transparency and accountability. But it has also, as the authors argue, created a narrowing, a hierarchy of evidence that can marginalize contextual, historical, experimental, and social forms of knowing knowledge held by communities. So knowledge carried by elders, knowledge that comes from living inside a system rather than studying it from the outside. And here is the dangerous irony. That narrowing, that restricted epistemic configuration is precisely what creates the openings that political actors exploit. When science speaks only in register in one kind of institution and through only one kind of credential, it is easier to discredit it. It's easier to weaponize it. The authors conclude that responding to the current crisis requires more than defending science against misinformation. It requires rebuilding the social, institutional, and epistemic conditions through which evidence can actually be produced scrutinized, trusted, and acted upon as a part of a collective public project. So transdisciplinary collaboration, meaningful engagement with affected communities, civil society organizations as genuine partners in knowledge making. So more plural, more reflective, more socially grounded forms of evidence. And this is exactly what we are building at Community of Guardians. So I want to be direct. This is not abstract to me. The Community of Guardians was founded on the belief that the gap between scientific knowledge and public action is not a communication problem. It is a participation problem, a trust problem, a structural problem. So we are building a platform where verified scientific experts can share knowledge directly in a community of engaged, passionate people, not as passive recipients, but as an active participant, where lessons become challenges, where challenges become actions, where actions are measured using the SDGs as indicators of real-world impact. So this is exactly the kind of plural, reflective, socially grounded evidence infrastructure the journal article is calling for. Not science handed down from on high, science in dialogue with the communities that it actually serves. When a nurse shares what she is seeing on the front lines, that is evidence. When an Indigenous elder describes the changes in the land over a lifetime, that is evidence. When a parent in a rural community describes what it means to drive 3 hours for a specialist appointment, that is evidence. All of it counts, all of it matters, and all of it belongs in the conversation. So, what we must do now. The fire alarm has been ringing for a very long time. The healthcare infrastructure is under unbearable strain. The political weaponization of scientific uncertainty is accelerating. The public trust that collective action depends on is eroding. But what I absolutely refuse to believe is that erosion is inevitable. What is required is not a defense of the old system. It is the construction of something better. A public health commons built on the genuine collaboration, honest uncertainty, community knowledge, and shared purpose. So this is not a naive dream. That is precisely what the science of collective impact tells us is possible when we create the right intentions and conditions. So SDG 3, good health and well-being, cannot be achieved by healthcare workers alone. However heroic they are, it requires all of us, scientists and citizens, policymakers and parents, researchers and their communities. Their research is meant to serve. All of them are important. And the question is whether we're willing to build it. And I believe that we are. I believe that among the 30,000 people in my LinkedIn network reading this article today, there are nurses, doctors, researchers, community organizers, parents, and everyday people who know deeply, personally, viscerally that something has to change. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up and ask yourself a question. What's your number? Go to our website, find out what yours is, and share it with everyone. And let's come together to make action happen. Thank you for listening.